Hi, Donahoe Dolphins. I'm Dr. Cashwell, Superintendent of Henrico County Schools, and it is my honor and pleasure to be able to read along with you today of the last chapter of your One School, One Book. I was so excited to receive my very own copy of Cleo, Edison, Oliver, Playground Millionaire, and I hope you've enjoyed this book as much as I have. So now let's get right to it as we finish off the book with Chapter 18. Chapter 18, Through Ups and Downs. Cleo called Kaylee 3 times. The first 2 times, no one answered. The third time, Ernie Jr. said their mom had taken Kaylee to her appointment with the shrink. Shrink? Cleo asked. Yeah, you know, head doctor. Cleo was suddenly afraid. Was her best friend dying? What's wrong with her head? Nothing's wrong with her head. She's seeing a counselor, a therapist, someone you talk to about your problems. The light bulb went on. Oh, she felt another stab of guilt. Her friend had needed to talk, and she hadn't been there to listen. Kaylee had been so in need they'd hired a professional listener. Well, will you ask her to call me as soon as she can? Got it. Ernie Jr. hung up. Cleo waited for Kaylee to call. Her family ate dinner. Kaylee didn't call. Cleo put her fortune poster back on the wall and worked on her passion project presentation. Kaylee didn't call. She got ready for bed, and still Kaylee didn't call. By 9:38, Cleo knew Kaylee wasn't going to call. She tore off a piece of paper from her memo pad, scribbled a note, and stuffed it into Barkley's carrier capsule. She poked her head into the hall. Mom and Dad's door was closed. The coast was clear. Shh, she said to Barkley with her finger to her lips. She held him by his collar and tiptoed downstairs to the back door. She slipped on her flip-flops and led him outside. Go straight there, she whispered. No sniffing trash cans or chasing cats. No getting into trouble like me. Barkley's eyebrows twitched and his tongue hung out one side of his mouth. She could tell they had an understanding. He sped through the back gate and around the corner, headed for Kaylee's house. As soon as he was gone, Cleo started getting nervous. Kaylee just had to get the message. Cleo would stand outside and wait for Barkley's return, hopefully with an apology accepted note from Kaylee. One moment later, the silent night air erupted with squawks and yelps. Oh no, it was coming from Miss Jean's. She ran back inside, grabbed her coat off its peg, and sprinted. She rounded the corner of their fence, expecting to see a fluffy ball of white feathers dangling from Barkley's mouth. Instead, she saw a gang of chickens attacking her dog. Cleo ran up, flailing her arms. Shoo! Shoo! Bad chickens! Wings battered her shins as she tried to pull her dog from the center of the feather fracas. The porch light snapped on, and Miss Jean shot out the front door in her bathrobe. She swooped in and grabbed up Big Betty, the largest one. Gloria, Alice, and Susan B. quietly gathered around Miss Jean's feet, pecking at bits of gravel on her driveway. How did you get out, you naughty girls? Miss Jean asked. Big Betty flapped and fluttered in her arms. Cleo noticed the metal gate across the driveway was partway open. Miss Jean, she pointed. Oh, I must not have latched it securely when I came in tonight. I'm sorry they were attacking your poor dog. You okay, Barkley? By the looks of him, he was fine, although he'd probably never want to have anything to do with chickens, ever again. Yeah, he'll be fine, thanks. Cleo helped Miss Jean return the chickens to the other side of the fence. They shut the gate tight. Where are you going outside this hour? Miss Jean asked when the job was done. Do your parents know you're out here? She looked at Cleo suspiciously. I only came out because I heard Barkley, so... She crossed her fingers behind her back. I'll get home now. Good night. Cleo waved and smiled as she led Barkley by his collar towards her house. But as soon as Miss Jean was gone, she turned and headed towards Kaylee's. "Come on, Barkley, we've got a message to deliver." They ran down the sidewalk to the big pink house. Cleo turned at the drive that led into the back. She stopped at the base of the balcony and looked up to see if a light was on in Kaylee's bedroom. The curtains were dark. She looked around, trying to figure out the best way to get her friend's attention. Barkley made a low grumble like he was getting ready to bark, but she clamped his mouth shut. "Not now, Barkley. I have another idea." The balcony. All she had to do was climb onto the balcony, and she'd be right beside Kaylee's window. A wooden thing made out of thin boards that crossed each other in a bunch of X's went all the way up to the balcony. A lattice. She'd thought she'd heard that is what Mrs. Ortega called it. Roses grew on it, but only as high as her waist. Lattice, ladder, they sounded kind of the same, and she was an expert ladder climber. Part mountain goat even. As long as the wood was strong enough to hold her, she could make it to the top. No problem. She grabbed on, found a spot for her foot, and pulled herself up. The wood felt kind of creaky, but nothing broke, so she kept going. Hand over hand, higher and higher. Barkley yapped. She turned and shushed him, and he sat, seeming to understand that now was not the time. That summer, they had pretended the balcony was a deck of a fancy cruise ship, and they were on it with their boyfriends. Cleo didn't have time for real boys, but she was fine with imaginary ones. She and Kaylee had hugged themselves, closed their eyes, and made kissing sounds. They laughed until they were rolling around on the deck, holding their stomachs. The memory almost made her laugh out loud again, but she controlled herself. She threw her leg over the railing and jumped down onto solid ground. She looked out in triumph. Cleopatra, Edison, Oliver had done it again. Barkley leaped up on the roses, then yelped and jumped back down. He must have snagged a thorn. "Stay there," she whispered to her dog. "I'll be back in a few minutes." Hopefully through the back door, she thought. Going down did not sound as fun as going up had. The balcony door whooshed open. Cleo spun around. "Cleo!" Kaylee stood there in her nightgown, breathing hard. "I heard you land and looked out my window. I thought someone was trying to break in." She rushed onto the balcony and looked over the edge. "How did you get up here?" Cleo smiled big. "Climbed, of course." Would her best friend smile back? Kaylee stared at her like she had no idea what to say. The quiet between them made Cleo nervous and knotted up as standing on one end of the high dive looking down into the super blue water. The only way out if you didn't want to get laughed at was to jump. "I'm sorry," she said, making the leap. "I know I've been so focused on my business and Cleopatra Enterprises, and I haven't been a very good listener, even though you're going through a really hard time with your dad and everything. And I've been a terrible, no, horrible best friend." Her hands flew all over the place, which happened when she was talking fast. "A good business partner maybe, but not a very good friend. And I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry." One of her hands came to rest on Kaylee's arm. She felt a pinch in her chest. "Really?" Kaylee's mouth opened a little and then closed. She peered over the railing again. "Hi, Barkley." It was hard to see his black fur in the dark, but they could hear him panting, and the moon cast enough light to see his body waggling like crazy. He barked. Kaylee looked at her. She smiled. Finally, just a little, but she smiled. Just as quickly, her smile disappeared. "My dad's getting married to that girlfriend I told you about, Charlene." She said the name as if she was talking about pickled asparagus. The news hit Cleo like a dodgeball to the chest. Mr. Ortega may not have been 100% reliable, but she knew Kaylee still loved him a whole bunch and was really hoping he would come back in spite of everything. She had even lit a candle at her Catholic church for him, but he hasn't been gone that long. Kaylee bit on her bottom lip. "I know." Cleo leaned against the railing, her arms crossed. Why were adults always going and messing things up and letting kids get hurt in the process? This wasn't just a bad decision, like taking a sharp knife outside or bringing a Nerf gun to school. This was tearing up a family, and families were meant to be forever, weren't they? That's not even the worst of it, Kaylee scowled. His fiancée wants me to be a junior bridesmaid. That's why they took me shopping, to buy me a dress. I don't even want to go to the wedding. She's like half his age. It's so embarrassing. Mom is really mad. She leaned against the railing and gazed in the direction of the street lamp. Things haven't been very fun around here the past couple of months. Cleo couldn't think of anything to say. What Kaylee was going through was awful. Terribly, horribly, gigantically awful. A tear popped up in the corner of Cleo's eye. She almost pushed it back down, but maybe crying because of someone else's hurt would be okay. The tears spilled over, and she didn't try to hide it. She reached out and grabbed Kaylee's hand, and they stood there, saying nothing, just feeling the cool breeze and smelling the sweet night-blooming jasmine and hearing Barkley sniffing around in the yard. Cleo squeezed Kylie's hand, and Kylie squeezed hers back. I'm so sorry I hung up on you, Kaylee said. It's just that my dad seems to think money can make all this better. Like buying me a fancy camera and an iPod Touch will make me less mad? Cleo wanted to see if her friend had more to say. This listening stuff was hard, but it felt good too. Kaylee seemed done. That's okay. Besides, if I can't handle getting hung up on every once in a while, I won't make it very far in the business world. She grabbed Kaylee's other hand and they faced each other. Without friends, money doesn't mean anything. Kaylee, I'm your friend through the ups and the downs. Promise. Me too. Shake on it? Cleo asked. They shook hands and then they gave each other one of the biggest bug-a-hugs ever. She would never let anything get in the way of their friendship. Nothing, not even Cleopatra Enterprises, Inc. Cleo wrapped her arms around herself, closed her eyes, and kissed the air. Oh, Donovan. She didn't know who Donovan was. It just sounded like someone you might kiss on the deck of a fancy cruise ship. Kylie giggled. Cleo smooched and smooched until Kylie was laughing for reals and everything was okay again. So, about that personalized barrette business. Cleo grinned. What do you think about the name Kaylee's Cuties? The end. I hope you enjoyed the book.